In a previous video about how to learn Tableau, one of the skills I mentioned that was really vital was having a better than average understanding of Microsoft Excel. Unfortunately, in this video, I'm going to be showing you one of those skills that I think is going to save your bacon next time you get a difficult data set inside of Excel. Let's get stuck in. Okay, so here I've got an Excel table. I've just generated the data from Macro. I'll include a link to this file in the description of this video if you want to download it and have a go at it yourself. Now, the issue with this data set is less about the data structure. Actually, each of these four tables have exactly the same information. I've deliberately sort of cooked it that way just to keep this example simple. But nonetheless, you can see there's a potential issue. If I try to connect to this in Tableau, this is what it ends up looking like. I can't really do much with this. You can see that the column names are sort of everywhere. And also it's kind of lost its structure that you could kind of see visually in Excel, but you can't really see it when you connect to it in Tableau. So how can we solve this? Well, there's one feature in Excel that can actually save your bacon here. And I don't really encourage people jump to this as a first solution. Typically, I try and understand how did the data get to this step, because there's obviously someone preparing the data in this manner because they believe it's useful. And so if you can actually work with that person to understand where they get their raw data from, then it's going to be a much better approach to go and get the data from that place rather than using this Excel file as a mechanism. But if you only have an Excel file, you only have access to it, and this is the only way you're going to be able to do this, then this isn't a bad solution. The solution here is a feature called named ranges in Excel. Essentially, what named ranges allow you to do is to define tables inside of a single sheet. So the dilemma we have here is that inside of Tableau, we essentially can't pick out each of these individual tables when we connect to the data. But if you look at this sheet, you can see that I've actually got three fairly visible tables. You can see this one here is a table, this one in orange, this one in gray, and I've also got what looks like an ad hoc addition to the data set over here on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side even. And so we can actually use the name ranges feature to allow us to structure this data a little bit, and then in Tableau, we can bring in those name ranges and use it like they're separate connections inside of Tableau. If we go up here to the formulas tab, and let me just open that fully so you can see it, click on define name, you'll see that we actually get a table that tells us how many named ranges we already have. We have three named ranges, table 1, table 2, and table 3. If I actually just bring this over here and we click on these dots, you can see that when I click on that particular item, it tells me how that particular cell looks like. So you can see here, mock data 2, it's at K16, and K16 is simply the column and the row. Now, if I go and highlight this, for example, you'll see that it actually defines a table, and you can see this is actually called table 1, and it's basically everything in table 1. If I go back to that menu, you can see that as I click through these, they've all got a definition, and those definitions are actually the starting and finishing points of a particular table. Tableau can actually understand these. When it opens an Excel file, it actually reads this. I'll show you this. And this is true in Tableau Prep and Tableau Desktop as well. So if I go to this bottom table, you'll see this is not formatted as a table. So there's a couple of ways to do this. The first way is just to highlight this little range and then go to define name. It will actually give you the ability to sort of give it a definition. And again, you just want to make sure that it's highlighting the right thing. So you can see here it says A28. So if I go to 8, you can see that it starts at A28 and then it goes all the way to F33. So it's essentially defining the top left corner and the bottom right corner of the table. That's how this is defined. And then when we click OK, you'll see that a named range appears. If I go back to define name, you'll see that it's there and it's called ID. Because I didn't give it a name, it used the very first column, essentially the A28 field, to give it a file name. So now that that's done, you'll see we have 4 tables in here, and now we're pretty much ready to go and hop over into Tableau so we can make this one nice clean data set. Let's hit OK and switch over to Tableau. Okay, now I'm here in Tableau, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this window because what I'd done is I'd previously connected to the file. And when I connected to the file in that instance, you can see that actually the 3 tables that I highlighted before that were already tables are actually here already. And you can see that these tables have a slightly different icon on the left-hand side. This is the signal to you that this is a named range. You might even see this with the sample superstore file. Sometimes when you connect, you'll see orders twice and you'll see returns twice. This is because they've also set that up as a named range, so you can use the named range or you can just use the whole sheet in Excel. In essence, a named range acts like an individual connection inside of that particular sheet. So you can actually have multiple name ranges inside of one sheet in Excel and bring these in as separate connections and even do things like create relationships, union them or join them to make the data set work. So now you know this. Let's see this happening in practice. Now you'll notice I added a thoughts table, and that was a very deliberate thing because what I did there is I worked on a file while the Excel was open. So let's go back and make sure this is saved. I'll save this. And what I'd like to do, especially when I'm working with Excel and Tableau, is if I no longer need the Excel file, I'm just going to close it because I don't need it sort of interfering. Essentially, there is this issue sometimes that if you leave Tableau open and Excel open at the same time, sometimes Tableau doesn't get the freshest data from the Excel file. So you just want to close it to make sure it's doing the right thing. And then what I'm going to do is go back in here, click Edit Connection, and reconnect to that file just to make sure I've got the latest version of that data. And when I do that, just give it a second. Hopefully we should get the connections coming through properly. And there you go. You can actually see it's appeared. Now, in some cases, this won't actually work. The reason this won't work is because essentially Tableau can sometimes cache the Excel file in a hidden folder on your computer. And in that instance, what you actually have to do is close Tableau and open it again, because when you close it, it kind of clears out the cache and then everything works fine. The other thing you can do is save the Excel file as a different file name, and that also tends to trigger the cache to update itself because it perceives it as a new Excel file. So you don't have to worry too much about that there. But nonetheless, you can see here, I now have the 4 different data sets ready to go, and I can start working with them. So whereas before, I can actually show you what the data looked like. This is what the original data set looked like when I connected it straight to the sheet, not using any named ranges. We've added one additional named range called ID, which was the additional set of data that we had. And now what I can do is I can actually work with these individually, and notice that as I bring them in, they look like tables. They actually work normally and they behave as normal. And what I can actually do, if in this particular case, I'm going to convert this to a union. And what Tableau will ask me to do is, hey, can you add the other things you expect to do in this union? So once I've converted that to a union, we get this little icon here. So then now I can drag everything else that's supposed to be part of that data set right into this, hit apply, hit OK. And there we go. We've got our beautiful data set. And I didn't have to go and sit there and copy and paste things into a sort of different format. We can go ahead to sheet 1, and I have a nice, beautiful, clean data set. And for the record, if we open this up, this all looks perfectly great. And we also have some context. The named range maintains its name. So you can see here that we actually know which named range it came from here in the source data. Tableau adds a field called table name because essentially we've done a union. So that tells us which table that union set of data has come from. So we can actually use that in our data set if we want to distinguish where the data came from or add it as context. But nonetheless, we have one beautiful sort of set of data. For the record, these are not real data, it's mock data. So I'm not sharing anyone's IP address or name or email or anything like that. Now, the final thing to do is to just be sure that named ranges are a little bit tricky. You need to make sure that essentially you keep the data within that range. And so what I tend to do is, again, I avoid using this because it's not resilient under really sort of typical work styles in most teams. Essentially, named ranges should be used where the data is being dynamically updated in Excel and there's no other way of getting at the data. So essentially, the use case here is you've got the file in SharePoint, someone goes into that Excel file, opens some weird macro that does something, loads up a particular set of data into that Excel file. Once that data is loaded, there is a sort of another macro in Excel that's reading that data and generating a lookup table of some sort on another sheet. And then that's what you want to connect to because it contains some context for something you're going to use in Tableau. It's really painful. You should ideally just go get Tableau Prep or Alteryx or something like that to do this. But nonetheless, that's essentially how it looks like in Tableau Desktop. Now, let me show you how it looks like in Tableau Prep very quickly before we end this video. Okay, so I'm here in Tableau Prep. I'm just going to go ahead and connect to the exact same Excel file. Let's go over here and click on the connection and just bring in the same Excel file that we've got here in my name ranges folder, very one at the top. And now that we're here, when we connect to it, you'll see that again, we have those ranges over here on the left-hand side. So they've got the same icon. It looks slightly different. It's less of a sort of a colored icon and it's more of a sort of linear icon, but nonetheless, it's all the same information. It's all the same data. So now we can do exactly the same thing. And again, you can just sort of drag these in as you would. It's exactly the same as before. The flexibility you have with Tableau Prep is, of course, that you can kind of get away with adding things to this union just by sort of taking advantage of the way the interface works. So you're literally bringing in 4 connections and it keeps them as separate connections. So whereas in Tableau we sort of relied on bringing them together at the connection stage, In Tableau Prep here, you could actually do things to each individual one before they come together because you've got a little bit more control. And of course, we've got exactly the same final output here with one large table. Now, the table names come across slightly different because that includes the Excel file name, but nonetheless, you have the same sort of flexibility. You could sort of pass this out, everything after the /, just get rid of everything before that, keep everything after that, and you're pretty much good to go. So that's named ranges in Excel, helping you out in Tableau, both Prep and Tableau Desktop as well. And hopefully you found this video useful. As ever, if you've liked this, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share this far and wide, let people know how much time they're going to save with this particular feature. I'll catch you in the next one.